Proven not perfect. The doctor is in the house. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm here today with Dr. Shairi Turner, who is very quickly becoming one of the favorite people in my world. We had the privilege to get all the titles together at the same time in this illustrious, wonderful leadership opportunity in the great state of Florida at the moment. But that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface around just the depth of where our conversations can go. So, in having those privately with her, I decided that it made a whole lot of sense to tap into her wisdom, her experience, and her thought provoking way, right? That's one of the things that's really excited me about our friendship, your thought provoking way. So, without further ado, the doctor is in, is what we're calling this segment. Dr. Shairi Turner, welcome to Proven Not Perfect.
Thank you, Chantra. I feel the same. I feel that we have been brought here together specifically for this moment. We are the right people, the right time, the right place, the right moment.
Girl, all of that. Okay, so I wrote this book called Proven Not Perfect. And in the book, I actually was led to define the seven truths that sort of resonate for me as a corporate executive, mommy, wife, Christian, and so many other things, right? And for each of my episodes, I try to anchor on one of the truths, right? And really that inspires me to say, I've got to talk to this person. And fortitude is one that sprung just literally off the page as I thought about several of the conversations, the private conversations that you and I are starting to have. My definition of fortitude, I'll go ahead and read, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think. Um, Fortitude, being still in a situation, acknowledging that the situation is big and I am bigger, seeing the hedge of protection all around myself, feeling the wings of refuge gently brushing my shoulder, seeing light up ahead and staying strong as it draws near.
Wow.
So when I read that to you, what do you hear?
I hear courage. I hear strength. I hear boundaries.
Oh, there's that word.
Boundaries. I just hear, like fortitude is about, in its simplest form, can be about courage in the face of adversity. But what I
Yeah.
love about your definition is that it's so much richer, right? It gives visual, something for us to think about visually when we think about fortitude. And I love that you've chosen that for this episode
Yeah.
because I think it really will resonate because now, if not any other time is a time that is asking us to have courage in the
Yeah.
face of adversity.
Ooh, girl. Ooh, so true. Okay. So there's so much we got to get into. Let's start with you.
Yes.
When you were a little girl, who did you want to be when you grew up?
Ooh. So for me as a child, I'm the daughter of um, people who were integral to Black theater. So my
Oh my
dad,
God.
an actor, director, um, theater, Broadway, off Broadway, um, schools, colleges, just anywhere that he could perfect his craft and continue to create his art, right? And then my mother is a writer, a publisher. Um, she too taught in theater and directed. So both of them were deeply embedded in Black theater, back when even before Denzel, and my dad taught Denzel, and
Oh
uh,
my God, he literally taught Denzel.
he
Gotta
did,
put
and
a pin on that
directed.
girl.
Yeah.
First crush. First crush. I might
And,
have
and
been two, but first crush.
right, and Samuel L. Jackson. It was all of those folks
Wow.
that were up and coming in Black theater. But those are the names that we recognize, but they were. There were so many more, right, who
Yeah.
were the next tier that really worked to create Black theater and make it a movement, right? So
Wow.
Black um to your question, to your point, I went in a different direction. I went towards science and
Mm-hmm.
medicine. And I don't think in retrospect, did I have my pediatrician was, in my space, right? Because living in Black theater, that's what I saw during the week, at night, in the weekend, and
Mm-hmm.
on the weekends. So when I decided like healing and helping was my superpower, could be my superpower, I had to look to who was in that space, right? So I didn't have parents who were doctors. So my pediatrician actually was, as I think about it, the first role model who showed me what healing and taking care of someone else actually looked like.
Wow. Wow. So, first of all, they do say that the actor's creative mind is very similar to the science mind, right? Isn't that sort of something that we've advanced to understand? So, how did your parents um, shape your decision or not on the direction that you would follow for your advanced training and your education? And did you start right in the field in the area that you thought you would, or was your journey a little bit different than you anticipated?
Yeah, great question. So they were always huge supporters, very proud parents. Initially, I had wanted to become a veterinarian. I loved animals. I worked in a veterinary hospital from 13 to 17. um, Actually was bitten pretty severely by a dog, and that caused me to kind of reevaluate my life choice. But they were always very supportive, proud. I would be the first physician in the family.
Wow.
As many of us, when we take on those firsts, right, the aspirations of the ancestors are subliminally placed on your shoulders, right?
Yes.
And
Ooh, talk
you
about
know,
it.
the stories of, your grandmother wanted to be a surgeon, your grandfather wanted to be a doctor, your aunt made it as far as becoming a nurse, right? But so there's all this that gets levied onto
Ooh,
a child, where, the interest was there, obviously, but it's, I think, for many of us, those who are our generation, right?
yeah.
Those external drivers become internalized and take on a life of their own, right? So,
Wow. I have to ask you to unpack that a little bit because I think that's very interesting because I do think that generationally speaking, while many of us were drawn to an area and a scope of interest and certainly supported as long as the formula meant going to college, getting a degree, and choosing a profession, um, I find that the more I talk to my peer group, especially my sisters of color,
mhm,
there was an extra weight and pressure that we walked into spaces with
yeah,
because whether it was a direct message or whether it was a subliminal message, it was understood that it was a privilege to be a part of a small percent that can say that they were able to do these things. And for that reason, we represented everybody. Did you
yeah.
ever hear messages like that?
Yes, and the word that came to mind when you were saying that, which is not a word that I use frequently, but immovability,
Oh,
right? Like there was an immovability about our destiny, right?
yeah.
Because our parents oftentimes, I mean, some of us, have parents who were physicians and, pr in those professions, but many of us did not have that opportunity, even though parents were well equipped. I mean, my grandmother was so talented in the artistic area, wrote poems, played the piano, wrote books, right? Was just prolific. But
Mm-hmm.
her father told her, education is important, but we only have a certain amount of resources, and we are going to expend those resources on the sons and not the daughters. So my grandmother raised her five children and went back to college in her 60s,
Wow.
right? So education being paramount. So self-taught and then went back to college to get her bachelor's. And similarly, my mom had gone to college, got her master's, raised her family, and then went and got her PhD in her 70s, right? So it's the
Wow.
messaging, right? Education was the pathway to whatever was next for our family, right? So it
Do we
became
feel the same way now with our kids, with your kids?
I think I feel that the role that education played in my life was a big fork in the road determinant. So I went to Stanford. I loved it. So Yale and Stanford were the two choices, the two places I applied in the two choices. And I loved Stanford. So to go from the Bronx to California, the
Yeah.
sun, the buildings, all of those things, and the really robust Black community that existed and still exists at Stanford University. So, but for me, I do feel like education, college, that university choice was a huge piece of the puzzle, right? So my parents scraped together, and I had scholarships so that I could go to a private school in New York City, so that I could have that opportunity, all the opportunity, right, that they could think would come. They were going to put it into education. So where we didn't take big elaborate vacations because we couldn't afford to, they were artists, right? But
Yes.
education. So I went to Stanford, my brother went to Stanford. That was the North Star still, right? So now our generation, where we've been able to use education and go further and and be fortunate enough to have those resources for our children. My husband's premise was always find the school that is right for you. Don't let anything and find the profession that is right for you.
Yes.
Not let external mandates, spoken or unspoken, from us or others dictate where you go to find that next space, because it's most important that you are happy at your university, right? We know that young people today, for a myriad of reasons, are in a mental health crisis, right? We have a
Yeah.
mental health epidemic. Suicide amongst young people of color is raging, right? So what we said to our children was find the school that will make you a better person. So when you come out, at the very worst, you are neutral to where you were when you entered. Hopefully not. What we're aspiring for is that you come out an evolved and better version of yourself, that school has, as my husband likes to say, goes through you, right? Like
Wow.
you've taken it all in. Like you're not just powering through the school, but it has gone through you. And when you make the right choice, the school can actually do that. And you on the other side is going to be a very different you than the one that started out. So one of the things we said was you must leave, the city that you grew up in, because
Yes.
growth happens outside of that space. And then that you choose the school that's going to go through you and is going to make you, help you evolve in your journey, and not choose a school because of external reasons, right? That at the end of that time there, you are less than you were when you entered because it was not the right fit for you. And I think that's still hard for our peers, right? Where we're coming
Yeah.
out of high tier universities many times, that we look to, what is the next, our child has to do
Yes.
that next best thing. Well, sometimes that next best thing, these are Gen Z, right? They know
Yes.
what that next best thing is. And if that comes into friction with the parent overrides, right? We as parents have that power, that privilege. We control the purse strings, right? We're funding this. And when we say we're funding your university, you must go here, that does not equate to finding the best match for that child. Because where you might have been at this large Ivy League school or large state school, your child is wired differently. Their experiences have been different. You, as their parent, are different than your parents. So they may be looking for that liberal art experience. They may be looking for that HBCU experience.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many of my Stanford classmates have children at Howard, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
like,
right.
and other HBCUs, right?
Right.
Because we see what today is and what today
Yeah.
brings and what school then mandates for our children, and we give them that choice.
Man, I there's so much in there that you said. I mean, I think I'll just pick a couple things and would love to get your thoughts. First, I definitely want to talk about the increase of mental illness and the choice to just give up life. Um, just in general, all kids, and for sure, African American babies in the United States. And then also want to talk a little bit more about the times and being clear that some of the choices that we make are largely informed by the experiences that we have had and we are having, right? And
Right.
that's true for us, it's true for our children. And making space for that can be freeing. So you pick which direction we go first, because they are both like on my
Here it all is.
mind.
Well, my role now, I took the path of medicine, going into internal medicine and pediatrics, but then realizing that the passion that had existed in me from early on when I started in med school was around mental health, and ultimately found my way to a space of advocating for mental health and working towards supporting the mental health of young people, dealing with this suicide epidemic that's happening. So I want to definitely touch on that
Please.
because we are losing children of color at rates. I mean, when we can say suicide rate for children who are 5 to 11, Black children who are 5 to 11 have a suicide rate that's twice that of their
Wait,
white.
wait.
Right.
I'm
So
sorry.
how does suicide even happen? Yeah.
I think I
And
heard you say age
5 to 11.
5.
Yes.
Age 5.
Yes. Suicide is now the number two leading cause of death for two age groups that have now, collapsed because it's the second cause of death. 10 to 24. Suicide is the second leading cause
Jesus.
of death. First leading cause of death, as you might imagine, in young people is accidents and injuries, right? That's sort of been the thing for a while. But now that like suicide has emerged,
Wow.
and that
That
even a
young.
5-year-old can conceptualize the end of life, and taking one's own life doesn't even really seem feasible for
No,
us, right? Like I can't say that at the age
no,
of 5 or 6 or 7, I understood what suicide was, right? But
no. Much
access,
less death, right?
right, much
At
less,
age
yeah,
5, you're so curious about this unfolding of a life
right, right,
that the trauma comes when and if you are forced to deal with loss at
yeah,
that early age.
yes. But I
Wow.
think we also now have to move out of our sort of space of privilege and understand that
Yeah.
young people, 5, 6, 7, are in homes where the generational trauma is real,
Wow.
right? Where and my passion around mental health really ties to childhood trauma as well, where we know now that physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, parents who are incarcerated, parents with mental illness, parents who separate or loss of through death or divorce, all of those things impact the brain development of young children, starting in utero, all the way through. Brain development goes into the early 20s. All of those experiences formulate and help
Yeah.
shape positively or negatively the brain development of children. So now we understand the impact of trauma, and we're looking at how does racial trauma, how will the pandemic trauma, financial trauma, immigration trauma, like all of those things are now kind of community trauma. All of those
Wow.
things are building into our understanding of the environment that young people are experiencing. And then with, the ability to access so many things online and through social media,
Mm.
to be able to find a way to take one's life, right, through social media is horrifying. It's absolutely
Oh,
horrifying because, it's a suicide is a death, that of impulse, right? It's in that moment the world seems like it's not, life is not worth living. And if there's an accessible way to end one's life, you know, when you know that and have that accessibility in that moment, the impulse can be enacted. But when we think about, that moment can pass in, 2 to 3 minutes.
yeah.
But if the gun is available or there's an awareness or there's a plan, that those 2 to 3 minutes can be actually life or death.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, God. So, I mean, gosh, when you think about how complicated life feels today,
Yeah.
and to your point, the access that our children have to information, and quite frankly, I think even the best parents can't keep up, Shairi,
Yeah.
right?
We are not
Because,
prepared.
right? You just can't
We
keep
are
up
not
because
prepared.
you can sit them in front of a computer or a phone and a YouTube channel or any kind of channel, and it looks like it's harmless, but you watch it with them for a minute and it starts to go places that maybe start to
Unexpected.
invite some of these choices that you wouldn't think your kid would lock into, right?
Yeah.
um Gosh.
Yeah. They are digital natives. We are not, right? We were
Yes.
we were not. This is a foreign language we're trying to learn as an adult versus for them, they are
That's all they
bilingual.
know.
They are bilingual in the digital world. And I think they will be far better prepared than we were to guide their children through these spaces. But, the evolution of technology is indefinite, it feels like. But so we do our best to keep up, but you know, we're keeping up, right? As opposed to
Mhm.
like sometimes not leading, they're leading us. So what we did as parents was to really fall back on like the values, right? Like how do you keep, instead of, putting up all the walls, how do you teach them to know what to look for, how to keep themselves safe? Because they are going to grow up and they do have access. So it's about having those conversations
Mhm.
around, social media and mental health, around how do you, create those boundaries with your school classmates, what's coming, right? It's like a constant dialogue as opposed to, just blocking this, blocking that without a conversation or a rationale, because then it almost makes it more enticing for them to trick us and find a way around these
Yeah.
blocks and continue to explore without any sort of parameters.
So, you know what? I'll tell you this too, as you talk, and I think about being a mom in this day and time, in particular to youngers, right? You and I, we're on the back end of this game. And our kids have largely, quote unquote, got through some of those formative moments. But and they're still getting through, admittedly so, but it's a little bit different than some of the moms that are coming up right now who have school age kids, younger kids. They're dealing with the digital language that their kids know better than they do. They're dealing with the pressures of so much going on just in life, their own careers, choices, some of which were allowing them to have more flexibility during COVID, and now that's gone away. all the things that they're dealing with, right? And I listen to this and I'm like, okay, so now if you're mommying, you are
Yes.
mommying and trying to stay centered and balanced and healthy mentally
Yes.
yourself, on top of trying to fight all of the fires and demons and darts that are coming at your littles as well, right?
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
seeing an increase in impact on women, on moms? And if
Yeah.
so, are there metrics that speak to some of those demographics? That's amazing.
Yeah, so the Surgeon General, one of his many, our current soon to be previous Surgeon General, US Surgeon General, put out such really impactful reports and used his voice and his office to alert us to things like the youth mental health epidemic, the loneliness and isolation that people are experiencing, the stress of being a parent in this current situation, a current environment, how stressful it is for all the reasons you mentioned. And in addition, just the parental peer pressure that can
Mm,
happen due to, our ability to see what every other parent is doing, right? All the vacations, all the parenting tips. Like if you don't create those boundaries
oof,
and those,
it is.
you're inundated, right? You're inundated with what every other parent is doing. And am I stepping up to the plate enough? You know, Forget about like the fact that people have different resources, different financial resources, different family resources, but the natural inclination is to compare, 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 and then stress ourselves out if we're not doing, quote unquote, doing enough. And then that puts our children on that hamster wheel of all the
Yeah,
activities. You have to do this, you have to have all these things, these
all of
profiles,
it.
or you won't go to college, right? It's like, and that
Right.
starts, depending on where you are in this country, some areas of the country are more pressurized than others, right? But it's like, what kindergarten are they going to? Like
That's
the
right.
waiting line, the waiting list for
That's right.
daycares is going to determine what Ivy League your child goes to. Whoa, whoa,
Right.
like that can't do that. Like there's no safe space for a parent when you're imbibing all of
Yep.
that and trying to make sure that your child stays boundaried around, what they're taking in. It takes you out of the moment, right? Where the key to
Mm,
parenting is so much about being present,
yes.
and everything around us is,
Say that for the cheap seats.
yeah,
Seriously,
yeah,
anyone
and
listening to us,
yeah,
that's
stay
the key to
present,
parenting. Stay
yeah,
present. Because there's
because
no rule book. But your
right.
child will, if you stay present, you will see, you will hear.
Yes. Yeah. You will hear things. You will not be reaching into your memory about, my childhood experience, or I should be doing this, or you should be doing that, and really meeting your child where they are so they feel seen and heard and acknowledged, right? They're not supposed to be a smaller version of us, right? They're
Oof.
actually supposed to help us evolve if we really think about it. And the
Wow,
evolution that,
Shairi,
yeah,
honestly, you drip so much, and that's actually so good. And I think so many of us miss it, right? I know for sure that's been one of the areas of opportunity for me where I think back to things that I may have done as a child, and a scenario may present itself where my child could or could not be in the same scenario. And I parent from a place of, I've been there, I've done that. And
yeah,
honestly, if there's one thing that a parent listening to us, I think, from your experience, skills, saying that, and me just saying, honestly, I've learned it myself, you gotta stop
yeah,
because you push your child into a place of confusion
yeah,
and distrust as well of themselves.
right.
Because if they've not done anything to lose trust, just because a scenario is a scenario where you didn't necessarily make a good choice,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that's going to be them. They're raised by you in a
Yeah.
different point in time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Proven not perfect, right? I mean,
Ah,
for me
with
too,
every
like,
kink on the head, girl.
yeah, you're learning, right? There's
Yeah.
no, there's parenting books. You've got to apply them as you're, taking the time to read, right? While you're trying to raise. It's the whole, building the plane while it's flying,
Mm,
fixing the plane while it's flying, and you just feel caught up in that moment.
mm.
And it's so very hard to stay present, but that would be the key to it all, because what you don't want to say to your child is like, you're not okay. Like, I'm not okay with how you are because you're not like me, or you're not worse than that. You're not like that child over there, because then you're
That's
telling them
right.
that, you prefer to be that child's mom than your child. Like, there's all this messaging when
That's
you
right.
don't stay, or you have a framework about who your child should be, when in fact they're just not that person. They are not,
Yeah.
they were raised by you, they are half you, they are half somebody else who was raised by other, a
Somebody
whole other
else.
family.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can't, if we can just step back and let that go, especially in these moments when the world is swirling around our children, and we just say, I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you, I
Mm.
want the best for you, like that would go such a long way.
All right, so now we got to go back to this word that's come up a couple times, boundaries. Let's talk
Yes.
about boundaries. So, first of all, how do you define boundaries? And why is the word boundaries on your mind right now in such a big way?
Yeah. So it came to me sort of the beginning of this year. Every year I try to um, first like set some goals and plan and figure out what the theme of the year is.
Mm,
And I think what happened towards the end of last year was just having conversations, some specific conversations where I exerted my boundaries, I defined my boundaries, I exerted my boundaries in a way that was calm,
mm.
and and then recognized how free I felt after that
Wow.
conversation, how free I felt, how empowered, and then how mentally my well-being was enhanced. And I was like,
Mm,
boundaries are, I think, especially for us as women,
mm-hmm.
um, sometimes we find ourselves it hard to define our boundaries. And really, when I say boundaries, it's the physical space, it's the psychological, emotional space, it's the mental space that we need to take to
Oh.
put between ourselves and others.
Mm,
And I think what's interesting is many times when people think about boundaries, they envision like building brick walls, right?
yeah.
I'm going to build this boundary. I'm going to, like, I'm going to stand here. I'm going to defend it. I'm going to fight. It's a fight when I tell you what my boundary might be. When in fact, a boundary can be, a chain link fence, right? Where you can
Ooh.
see through it, you can hear through it, you can touch the other person on the other side, but there's some clarity about what is my space emotionally, psychologically, physically, and what is your space.
Wow.
In fact, it's not a battle, right? It is, in fact, an opportunity for me to clarify for myself what my priorities and values are, and to share them with you. And then once we have that understanding, to connect more authentically and not less.
So I can think of that being a relevant thing to consider in every lane of our life, whether it's our family life, whether it's our faith life, our spiritual life, whether it's our work life, right?
Yes.
Community life, all of it, right? Wow. So have you put into practice some specific things that would be useful as we think about boundaries and what it means for us? Because just because you read that in the word and that's how the word resonated in your heart doesn't mean that that's how I read it and it resonated in my heart. In fact, if it's a living word, it's going to naturally be a little bit different what I
Yeah.
hear and what you hear because we're
Yeah.
different people, right?
Yes.
So
So
tell me how you sort of reconcile and keep that.
yeah, so everybody's boundaries are different, right? We were all
Yes.
raised differently. We had different parents. We were raised in different parts of the country, maybe different parts of the world, where, like, when you think about physical boundaries, some people are not huggers, right? And some
Yep.
people don't want you close in their space. But I think the important things about boundaries is first getting clear about what's important to you, right?
Oh,
What are the things that make you feel safe and
oh,
secure when you interact with others, right?
okay.
Like a boundary is I don't want to be around people who are constantly negative, right?
Oh,
It doesn't feel
girl, we
good,
share that one.
right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to take that in and start emulating that in any
Nope.
way. So I can say, like, I'm either not going to spend time with that person. Sometimes that person is a relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
In which
Yes.
case you have to say, get clear with yourself about, how much time you're willing to spend, if any. We just came out of the holiday season.
Yes.
Oftentimes it's those times when you're kind of naturally going to interact with folks who may not share the same values, where you have to establish your boundaries. And I just think knowing what's important to you, right? Is
Okay.
it physical space? Is it topics of conversation? Boundaries around now the whole political conversation and where we're going as a country, right? How much do you want to engage in that with other
Yeah.
people, right? Being clear for yourself
For
first,
yourself. Yeah.
right?
And then putting that in practice, I just think about it practically speaking for me. So if I'm clear up front on what my boundaries are, and I love that one, I don't want to intentionally place myself to hear negativity and be a part of negativity, right? And so if that's the case, if that's my clear thing, and I'm in a situation where maybe it's family, maybe it's work, maybe it's something, right? What is my strategy to quickly acknowledge that I'm now in a space that's no longer serving me?
Right.
And then how do I navigate? What are going to be my strategies to navigate my way out of it? If
Yeah.
it's a work situation, maybe it's, with all due respect, I don't share that viewpoint, and I really don't care to discuss it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the conversation ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you do the same thing in your family, or you do the same thing, otherwise, right? Or maybe it happens around you and you sort of hum. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it starts with being clear.
Yep. And how you define first how you defined and then how you defend your boundaries are both very unique and personal to you. But I think
Define and defend. Okay.
defend. And I
Okay.
think when I say defend, I don't want people to think combat, right? It's
Okay.
exactly the opposite.
Ooh.
Because one of the reasons people are hesitant about defining and defending their boundaries or establishing their boundaries, maybe that's a better word, because it feels like it's going to be a battle. When
Yeah.
in fact, if you can step back,
Yeah.
take a deep breath, and I think one of the
Ooh,
things
that's a good one.
that I've heard and learned from our Gen Z children is like the ability to just say, all right, so that's not okay with me, right?
Ooh.
Like just practicing that statement so that it's
Mm.
your go-to, that's not okay with me, and here's why, right?
Mm.
And just make the
Do you
statement,
have to say here's why? So now Gen X is asking the stupid questions, right?
right?
So do you have to say
No,
why, or
no.
can you just say, okay, that's
You
not
can just
okay with me?
say, I mean, it's not okay with me.
Because I
Um,
find Gen X, I find me,
yeah,
I'm big on the explaining.
explaining.
And I find that the explaining takes me down a path that now just opens up my vulnerability that I
Right,
never really wanted anyway, right?
right,
Why do I have to do the splaining?
right. You don't have to explain.
For the educated friends
Yay.
in the seats, we
Yes,
do know it's explain.
right, right. So you do not have to explain if it makes you feel vulnerable or defensive, but sometimes it provides that opportunity for clarity, right?
Yes.
Like, so
Okay.
it really is what works best for you. And
Okay.
as you start to practice the I'm not okay with this, like,
Yeah.
I'm not
It's a
okay
good
with
one.
this, so I'm going to go back to my desk or I'm going to end this call. Maybe we can pick it up at another time, right? You don't have to explain that it's making your blood pressure elevated. And I remember when my neck got hot, right? Like, or red, but you don't have to get into all of that. It's like very clear,
Yeah.
calm, kind. I don't think this is a I don't, this is not okay for me, and I don't think
Mhm.
this is a productive use of our time,
Hmm. I
right?
love it.
Maybe we can pick it up later, but maybe not. You and I were together not too long ago
Yeah.
and had some opportunities to show like, hey, that was a subtle definition of boundary keeping, right?
Yes.
Where nobody's feelings were hurt, but
Yep.
it was clear that, like, you're not going to move that into my space, right? Like, you're not going
Yeah.
to move that into my space. And I'm okay if you're not happy with that. I'm not going to insist
Yeah.
over it. I'm just going to be very factual. No,
Yes.
thank you. No, thank you. I don't want this. I
Yes.
don't want to do this, right? Because I think
Yes.
oftentimes women,
Ooh.
especially in dynamics with men, get this subtle pressure to do something.
Mhm.
I don't want to do that. I don't
Well,
want to, I don't have to explain it.
I have to go here too, right? So, many years in corporate and successfully navigating the experiences over, 36 years or so, a lot of years. One of the things that I can honestly say, especially starting early career, you're in spaces where usually you're one of few,
Yep.
and if not the only woman in your set with men. And because of that, you are in this prove mode, right? Because you don't want anyone ever to say that you got something that you did not earn. The problem with that is that if you're overly prove mode without boundaries,
Yep.
and they don't see it that way, you're just doing way too much.
Yeah. And then I look back on like, what is the toll on you, right?
Yes.
When we turn around. So we continue in this space that does not, this corporate or workspace that does not feel like it supports or sustains us, but we are going to, do what we need to do and let
Yes.
people move in and out of our boundaried space. What is the toll that it takes, right? So we have this
Yes.
job, but we're losing our hair. We
Oh.
have this job, but our blood pressure is, now high enough to require medication or uncontrolled, right? We have
Mm.
this job, and it's not to say like you have to give up the job, right? Because we
No,
understand we have to work for a living,
that's
and
right.
we do have
Because this
aspirations.
doesn't mean you don't enjoy it, right? I mean,
Right,
honestly,
right, right.
I would
We have
say that,
aspirations for
yeah,
our career, right?
yeah.
So it's a balance, but if you're taking too much in,
Mm-hmm.
right, you have to stop and assess like, is this worth it?
Yeah,
Is
that's
this
right.
the right place for me if my
Mm.
health and my mental health and well-being are being so deeply impacted that I
Mm.
can't be myself in other spaces, and I'm certainly not
Mm.
myself here.
Girl, look, there is a whole conversation that I believe we need to have to talk about navigating spaces as female leaders. And that can be any space, right? From my, healthcare industry leaders to my theater industry leaders to corporate leaders, right? I think there is absolutely some nuggets in there for us to unpack around how to successfully do that. So I would love to have you back to talk about that particular piece. But before I let you go, something that resonates for me as we talk and think about boundaries is the notion of freedom. And it's just the freedom to be firmly, clearly who you are unapologetically. And I'd like to read something from a book that I've just picked up along the way. So full credit to the author of this. But the title is Freedom. The question that the author poses is, does the artist have a social responsibility? Now, the author goes in to say some might agree with this notion and want to encourage artists to create accordingly. Those who hold this belief may not have a clear understanding of the function of art in society and its integral social value. The work of art serves its purpose independent of the creator's interest in social responsibility. Wanting to change people's minds about an issue or have an effect on society may interfere with the quality and purity of the work. This doesn't mean that our work can't have those qualities, but we generally don't get there by planning them in the creative process. It's often more difficult to accomplish a goal by aiming at it. Deciding what to say in advance doesn't allow whatever's best to come. Meaning is assigned once an inspired idea is followed through. It's best to wait until a work is complete to discover what it is saying. Holding your work hostage to meaning is a limitation.
Yes.
One more thing. Works that attempt to overtly preach a message often don't connect as hoped, while a piece not intended to address a societal ill may become an anthem for a revolutionary cause.
Ooh.
Art is far more important and more powerful than our plans of it.
Oh,
What does
girl.
that say to you?
Oh my God. That says it all. It encapsulates it all. It is artistic boundaries, freedom through
Yeah.
artistic boundaries. Do not tell the artist what, no matter what's going on in society, because the artists exist within society, right? So
Yeah.
their interpretation will naturally come through. But if you're asking the artist to prescribe, prescribing the artist to do something, to address something, you're losing the whole
Yeah.
natural process that exists, that is why beautiful art is created, because it's created where the artist says, my boundaries, I have my boundaries about how this piece is going to be. It's going to come through me, right? You're not going to
Yes.
push it through me. It's going
Oof.
to move through me. And that is the epitome of all boundary setting, right? It's about freedom, mental
Yes.
well-being through boundary setting. Don't let somebody push a piece on you, whatever that piece may be. Don't let
Yeah.
someone push that piece on you and ask you to produce something that does not come innately to you.
Ooh, and I'm gonna give a +1 to that and say the responsibility that we all have to be mindful of when we become the pusher
Yes.
and to be mindful. And I think of that in particular with our babies, as we talked earlier, right? Really kind of leaning in and assessing, where am I really paying attention and listening and allowing them to show? And where am I pushing based on my own boundaries? So, girl, sis, I love you so much. You're amazing. I'm grateful to God that you are just a new treasure in my life. And this conversation, given up to Him,
Yes.
we're proven not perfect, and we're proud. And that's it. We just are who we are. No
All right.
changing us.
Thank you.
The doctor is in, y'all. We'll be talking more. See you soon.
Bye
Bye.
bye.